Well, we got cut off earlier in a conversation with Neha Poonia, who's coming to us from India. Neha, welcome back once again. When we were cut off, I was asking you, just going back to that visit by Donald Trump, that February state visit to India, where he was very warmly welcomed by all Indians and the Indian government through the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. I was just asking if there has been official response from the Indian government in terms of developments in the US.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Prime Minister Modi's interpersonal relationship with President Donald Trump is well known. Both leaders have often spoken very fondly of each other every time they've met, which is twice in the last 1 year. There's been a lot of backslapping, hugging, and tacit endorsements of each other. Just earlier this year, Donald Trump was here in India, where he was given a massive reception by the Indian government. It was labeled by many experts as an attempt by the government to give him an opportunity to woo Indian American voters back home, and that's why there was a lot of curiosity about how Prime Minister Modi would react to his friend Donald Trump losing this election. But we woke up this morning to a tweet from Prime Minister Modi, a very warm one at that. He said that Joe Biden's performance in the election was spectacular. He said that as a former vice president under Barack Obama, he worked tirelessly to give a fillip to Indo-US ties, and he's certain the next 4 years will be just as promising. He also had a word of encouragement for Kamala Harris, calling her victory path-breaking, saying that it's a proud moment not just for her family here in India, but also for many Indians who watch this, and he believes that her being in Joe Biden's government will be a very encouraging step for Indo-US ties.
So Neha, let's talk some more about the significance of Kamala Harris' ascension to power. It's not only as the Indian heritage that is important here. It's also the fact that she's a woman. And obviously there are huge equality issues in India. Well, how does this speak to that particular challenge?
Absolutely. In fact, a lot of people are talking about that here's a woman who shattered so many glass ceilings in just one step. She's inspired so many others like her, not just in the US. I heard someone earlier on the show talking about how they had an Indian daughter, and she was really glad to see someone like her daughter in the White House. It's a similar sentiment here in India as well. We've had an Indian Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, but she's been the only one. There's been no other person to shatter that glass ceiling here in India, and many girls are now tweeting, posting on Instagram and Facebook about how inspiring this is. It clearly speaks to them, they say, on so many levels, especially given the kind of years we've had with the Me Too movement, with so much talk about gender inequality in different parts of the world. So certainly very, very inspiring, very evocative for many Indians who are talking about wanting to see a similar movement here in the country as well.
We've spoken so much about Kamala Harris. In spite of the massive love that Indians have for Donald Trump, how are they feeling about Joe Biden?
I think as far as most Indian voters are concerned, they haven't been following the twists and turns very carefully, but there are most certainly two very firm camps. There's a pro-Trump camp that you referred to. Many people, especially from the right wing, who believe he was the right man for the job, especially given that India is fending off a military challenge from China, given that there's a border standoff that's now gone on for 6 months. But there's also a Kamala Harris camp as well that I've been telling you about. A lot of people not really talking about Joe Biden, especially not regular citizens who are, for the moment at least, more taken in about the moment of history that Kamala Harris has scripted and her links to India at that. But there are experts who are talking about Joe Biden. They're talking about how he's a familiar face for the Indian administration. He's someone who has worked to strengthen Indo-US ties when he was in the Obama administration. He's a big champion, experts say, of giving India more prominence, especially in the Indo-Pacific, to balance a rising China. There's talk about how he is a familiar face, like I said, so it'll be easier for the administration to work with him. That kind of enthusiasm also coming through in Prime Minister Modi's tweet that came out earlier on Sunday morning. But as far as the general public is concerned, there isn't much chatter about Joe Biden. Most people certainly more excited about Kamala Harris, who looks like them and has made history.
So in terms of this development, Joe Biden ascending to the presidency of the first nation in the world, what sort of issues are most important in terms of the relationship between India and America?
That's a great question, something that India and experts here have been asking themselves as well, because the last 4 years of the Donald Trump presidency were very unpredictable. Even though I spoke of that interpersonal relationship between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi, despite that bonhomie and bromance, as many sections of the media labeled it, it was a relationship filled with friction, especially on the trade front. There was a trade spat that both nations were engaged in. Donald Trump often accusing India of being a tariff king, of not giving enough market access to American firms. There was also the issue of cracking down on immigration. Thousands of Indians go to the US every year on the H-1B visa regime. That's something that Donald Trump was clamping down on. So on these two fronts, experts say that it will be a slightly easier relationship with Joe Biden. It will be a return, they say, to steady, old-fashioned diplomacy. Of course, the issue of trade is not going to entirely go away, given how divided America is in the aftermath of this election. But perhaps the handling of the issue by the Joe Biden administration will be slightly more easy to handle. Immigration, of course, they've promised a more liberalized immigration regime, which will benefit thousands of skilled Indian IT workers. There's also the question of China. Most experts agree that Joe Biden will continue to promote India as a responsible ally in that regard. But of course, there are concerns on another front altogether. You've had Kamala Harris in the past criticize India's handling of the issue of Kashmir. Democrats known to generally be a lot more vocal about issues of alleged human rights abuses, of declining press freedom and declining space for dissent. And that's one quarter that many experts say will ensure a slightly more tense relationship between New Delhi and Washington. But experts still believe that given the larger challenges facing both the US and India, it's going to be a manageable issue.
Neha, thank you so much for talking to us. But just before I say goodbye to you, I want to ask you something that's totally unrelated. At the beginning of our conversation, you said in a country like India, where they're so engaged with content from their own country, they're usually not interested in international events. What did you mean there? Is it because India has such a big population, or is it a matter of charity begins at home?
I think it speaks to the kind of population we have, one, yes, because in urban centers, in cities like Delhi and Mumbai, we have seen a lot of engagement with the US election, and that's obvious from the kind of posts people are putting up on social media. India had no skin in the game, and as far as the US election is concerned, it wasn't the Indian citizen voting for it, but many urban centers had a lot of interest in the election. But what I also meant was that this is a country of a lot of stories. We have a state election happening in the country right now. It's the first litmus test for Prime Minister Modi in terms of how he handled the COVID-19 pandemic. Where I am in New Delhi, pollution levels have shot through the roof. They're 20 times over the permissible limit today, which means that it's a huge problem for people of Delhi who are grappling not just with a resurgence in COVID-19 cases, but also with breathing in toxic air, which could make COVID-19 cases worse. In rural India, of course, not so much interest in this election. They're not following every twist and turn. But that's what I really meant, that it's a massive country, home to 1.3 billion people, a lot of more domestic pressing issues which possibly didn't keep people hooked to every single update coming in, as every state turned blue. But yes, there was limited engagement in the urban centers, and those are the people really celebrating Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's win.
Neha, thank you so much for your time this morning.